And we have Erik Solheim, the former Under Secretary General of the United Nations and the sixth United Nations Environment Program Executive Director. Thank you, sir, very much. Have you joined from Paris or have you joined from Norway? You were traveling, I was told.
I'm joining from France. It's not exactly Paris, it's in the southern part of France, near the city of Nice.
Okay, so thank you so much. We have been all eagerly awaiting your presence here. And Erik sir is he's traveled almost the entire globe. He is very well versed with Indian subcontinent, Sri Lanka, China, India. He knows half the population of the world closely enough, I must say. So we have a nice video from your earlier Environment Day messages. We will play a little later on because I like the whole concept that you related over there. So Erik sir, thank you very much. We had a good inauguration at Brookfield International School. Little kids singing some environment songs. They have been preparing for this event for a long time. And we had Destiny Wagner, Miss Earth 2020, 2021. She joined from Belize in the midnight over there. You just now heard Jamie Harrell. She's a good friend. She was Miss Earth 2014. She works in environmental awareness, climate education. She's a TV host, actress, and whatnot. And she's always being with us. And Ronnie Anthony is from Taiwan. This program is being coordinated from 5 locations in the world, from Taiwan, from India, from Philippines, and 2 more locations. So it's complicated, but it's a 24-hour non-stop. So Erik sir, for your opening comments, and you're going to stay with as long as you want, but at least for this session, your opening comments and then play some videos, and then we might have some question-answer session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed the conversation between Jamie and Ronnie, which I just watched now, because they focused on what I think is very essential. What can individuals do, what can business do, and what can governments do? And I come with a very optimistic perspective, very different from many others. And this is not to deny that we have a massive problem. There is a huge triple environment crisis on the planet. Climate change, as we just heard, pollution in many cities, not least in India, and the destruction of nature. We are wiping out different species and we're destroying rainforest and other very, very important ecosystems. So there is a massive problem. That's the bad news. The good news is that we have, as was said here, all the technologies, all the policies, and all the finances needed to solve this problem. Technologies, solar energy is now the cheapest energy anywhere in the world. So if you shift to solar, not only you do very well for planet Earth, but you do very good for the economy at the same time. You save money by switching to solar, so that technological problem is resolved. Finances, I mean, look in Glasgow last year in the climate talks, there was a lot of quarrels about $20 billion. That was what the developed nations through Hillary Clinton had promised to the developing world, and what has been actually delivered. But that's peanuts. That's very, very small money. Why do we quarrel about the small money when the big money is elsewhere? And as an example, 3 weeks after Glasgow, the People's Bank of China, the Central Bank of China, they launched a low carbon facility for China. That was $1,000 billion, 50 times what we quarrel about in Glasgow. And of course, even for the poorest part of the world, say for Madagascar or Malawi, African poor nation, it's much, much more important what the People's Bank of China does, because that will drive down the price. Solar and wind and green hydrogen will be affordable for African countries. They wouldn't need the aid from the developing world simply because they can afford the new technologies from their own resources, which of course is much, much better. And we have all the policies, and let me mention a few of them, because all the policies are win-wins. Good for the economy, good for people, and we need to be people-centered. Climate change is not about temperature, it's about people's lives. So they're good for people, and they're good for the environment at the same time, ecology and economy. And let me mention four areas for this very, very briefly. First, renewables. If we move from coal into solar and wind, we save money, make people's life much better, health much better, and it's very, very good for Mother Earth at the same time. China now produces 60% of all new solar power in the world. 80% of all the solar panels made in the world last year were made in China. Because this cannot continue. Congratulations to China for doing great work, but the rest of the world need to follow up and do better. We need, of course, production of solar panels in massive scale in India, in Europe, other parts of the world, and we need to switch to solar everywhere. And of course, in India, Prime Minister Modi has launched any number of initiatives to drive solar energy in India. India has some of the biggest solar plants in the world in the states of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. These are the biggest singular solar plants, providing enormous energy to, of course, the Indian people who need it. Still, there are Indians who are not on the grid and who cannot afford energy, so they need more energy, but it can come from solar. India, by the way, also have the first all-solar rail station in the world in the state of Assam, first all-solar airport in the world in the state of Kerala, Kochi. So a lot is happening, and very soon India will be the second biggest producer of solar power in the world, next to China. But we all need to step up. Secondly, let's move the traffic into electricity. And here I can hold up my own nation, Norway, as a good example. The Norwegian government a few years back decided that we want to switch the cars into electric vehicles. But for that to happen, you need to give people some incentives for that. I mean, no one wants to be the first in your neighborhood to buy an electric car. You want to see it works with the neighbors before you buy it. I mean, for most people, buying a car is one of the biggest expenses for their family. They don't want to experiment with something new. So what we did was that we changed the tax burden, electric cars going down, gasoline cars going up, so that the relative price was better. And secondly, we said, if you drive an electric car, well, you get easier access to parking, to ferries. You have a lot of ferries in Norway, and you can drive in the bus lanes into the cities if there are morning congestion. And now, last year, 80% of all vehicles in Norway were electric. Very soon it will be 100%. And no one has ever been driving an electric car want to switch back, because the electric car is much, much better. Think of the following in Norway, which is a very cold place. If in the morning it's very cold, I can just take my app, I can turn on the heat in the car, and when I get into the car, it's warm. The gasoline cars, you have to spend 15 minutes to get the car warm every morning. No one wants to go back. And now you see, of course, electric mobility taking off. China last year was half the global market for electric cars. But say in the state of Maharashtra in India, the government there, 120 million people, it's bigger than the Philippines, so it's not a small place. They are making charging stations all over the state, and the buses in Mumbai, which is a huge, huge fleet of buses, will go all electric in the next few years. So the opportunity for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers to be electric is massive. Thirdly, tree planting. Let's make the planet much greener. In the Indian state of Telangana, they have increased the tree cover by 3% in the last 2 years. In the city of Hyderabad, it's a 10 million city, soon to be a 20 million city. So again, it's not a small place. It's the declared tree city of the world. And they have a huge number of beautiful urban parks in Hyderabad. And by the way, the same is happening in Bangalore and other Indian cities. And in China, President Xi just promised that China will plant an area the size of Belgium every year from now to 2030. Well, that matters. Belgium is not the biggest nation in the world, for sure, but still it's a substantial area which will be tree planted by China. But when China do this, India do this, and of course, any number of others, city of Milan in Europe has massive plans for tree planting. In London, they are now rewilding, bringing back beavers and a number of other animals which went extinct in the city, coming back by massive efforts from the city authorities of London. And fourth, agriculture. The Indian state of Andhra Pradesh, they have maybe the most interesting experiment in the world. It's called a pilot, but it's 6 million people involved, so it's not small. 6 million, that's more than the population of my nation, Norway. And what they are doing is moving into what's called zero budget natural farming. That means using much less or no fertilizer, much less or no pesticides, using the residues from the agriculture, using cow dung, using cow urine as the fertilizer. Again, better for the economy because the yields go up, better for the health because people tend to get less sick, less cancer among the farmers, and of course much better for the soil and for Mother Earth. And by the way, the Indian guru, Sadhguru, has just embarked upon a huge campaign. He was riding a bike from London to Delhi to create attention to soil, the need to protect the soil better. If we add up these four, renewable energies, electric mobility, tree planting, and a greener agriculture, because there are many more areas we need to move into a circular economy. I can mention a lot more, but the point is we have all the technologies, all the money, and all the policies we need just to mobilize the will. And finally, we know from history that change happens when three factors come together. Citizens, like say Ronnie, demand action. People, you need civil society, people to demand that the leaders act. Then you need political leaders to set the vision, to drive the change. And then you need business to make change happening in scale. That was what happened, for instance, when we solved the problem of the ozone layer. It was the biggest environment problem in the world in the 1980s. It's now basically solved because people demanded action, political leaders had the vision to make the change happen, and business made all the new equipment we need. We have much more air conditioning in the world now than we had at that time, just that the air conditioning is not destroying the ozone layer. So I think we can take an optimistic view. We know what to do. We just need to do it much more dedicated and much more urgently than we do at the moment.
Thank you, Erik sir. Of course, your knowledge and the knowledge of the land itself is comprehensive. So it's something that strikes to us straight away. Because tell me something about the World Resource Institute, because not many people, especially the younger generation, is aware of how it works on the ground level.
Sorry, I couldn't follow. So,
can you tell us something about the WRI, how it works on the ground level? Because the younger generation is not very much in the know-how of how it works.
World Resources Institute is basically the most important global think tank on the environment. It started 40 years back as a very small American NGO, a small outfit with a few people in an office in Washington, and has now developed to the biggest think tank with offices in Delhi, Jakarta, Beijing, just to mention three Asian capitals, but also many other places of the world. And what it tries to do is to look into what are the best policies to drive the change, and then discuss those with civil society, with governments, and with business. If we want to move fast into solar, how can we do it in the cheapest and most environment-friendly way? So it's a global think tank to look into what are the best policies.
Okay, that's great. One question that always becomes a bone of contention in international forums is about the developing countries against the developed countries, because the developed countries are more towards doing things because their focus on poverty, education is slightly less demanding than countries like India and China, which obviously have lots of still natural resources left, but they are so overcome with the current demands of the populations, which is basically to address their poverty, education, and all sorts of the basic needs that they must fulfill. And in doing that, they find it very hard to come up to the levels of what should actually be happening on the ground level. How do you think this can be addressed? Because there is always on the international level, there's a question of you are already developed, so you can do this thing. We are still developing. We can't do that. The fight goes on. So you understand what I am trying to ask. Here also for the population also, like there are a lot of younger population who wants to do something and who wants to commit themselves to things that will improve the future. But they must look to address their day-to-day needs before they can do that. So what is the midway out where we can arrive at a solution that we progress towards our environmental protection at the same pace as any other?
This is a very important question, but I believe it's the question of the 20th century, not of the 21st. Because true, in the past, if you wanted to develop, you needed to base development on fossil fuels. There simply was no way any nation could prosper without coal, oil and gas. So the development path was the same everywhere. I mean, starting in the United Kingdom, then going to Germany, France, United States, Japan, South Korea, China. It was the same. First you prioritize development, and when you get rich, you start solving the problem you created. First you pollute like hell, and then you start cleaning up. But now it's very different, because you don't need to pollute first to get a huge middle class and to bring everyone out of poverty. Solar energy is cheaper than coal. You save money if you move from coal to solar. In some places, even cheaper to close down all old coal plant and move into solar. Everywhere is cheaper to construct a new solar plant than to construct fossil fuel plants. And of course, the energy crisis in the world coming from the war in Ukraine is also really emphasizing this, because every nation wants to be energy independent. And what does that mean? Well, you need to base your energy consumption on your own resources. And the sun is Indian, the wind is Indian, while of course the fossil fuels are coming from outside. So today there is no contradiction between development and environment. You can say, yes, thank you, we want both. And to be concrete, I think Prime Minister Modi has very, very well understood this in India. In the past, the discussion in India, whenever I came there, was exactly what you said. Do we want to develop, or do we want to take care of the planet? And surprise, surprise, 98% of all Indians wanted to develop. Everyone wanted to get out of poverty, for sure. So the environmentalists always lost that debate. But again, that was a debate in the past. Now Prime Minister Modi is saying, let's move India very fast. Let's get fast economic growth, but that is do it based on green hydrogen, just launched a mission for that, on solar, on wind. So it's a win-win. And finally, one really inspiring example, and probably maybe the most inspiring of all the examples, that's Singapore. Because Singapore is one of the very few places where they're starting to go green when they were still poor. In the 1950s, I mean, people cannot understand it now, because Singapore is now probably the richest place in the world. Fantastically green also. But in the 1950s, Singapore was a very poor port. Sailors coming from Europe didn't even dare to go and land there, because they were afraid of being robbed and afraid of the immense poverty in Singapore. But then they were so lucky to get a really visionary leader, Lee Kuan Yew, who said, we want to develop Singapore, but we will do it in a way which is also green. And Singapore was one of the first, much before Europe, they said, if you want to take your car and go into the city center of Singapore, well, you cannot go with just one passenger. Then you pay a fee, and the fee we use to produce a much better public transport system in Singapore. And Lee Kuan Yew in the 1970s, he moved the industries away from the Singapore River, cleaned up the river, cleaned up the seaside, and made Singapore what is today. I would claim maybe the greenest, or at least at the very certain one of the greenest cities in the world. And that happened when Singapore was still poor, not just after they got rich. So let's get out of this old discussion of environment or ecology, do both.
Okay, that's great. And that is a question that often crops up. So it's a good thing that we addressed it here. While you are here, we would like to show you a small promo that we made for the event, and then we'll play one of your messages. I like it so much. So can I request the team to play track V1 and then V23? B23.
Every year throughout my life, I've been up in the Norwegian mountains. My father was born in one of the valleys close to the city of Lillehammer, which once hosted the Olympics. And my family had a small hut there, until very recently no electricity, very primitive from the modern standards of life. But it was a great way of having summer holidays, winter holidays, Easter holidays. You can name all the holidays, we always went there. We did primitive fishing, we were following the cows through the landscapes, and we had all our favorite cow. We were looking for moose, and if we were very lucky we could see a moose. And there was an enormous opportunity for great outdoor sports, bicycling or moving up, watching the mountains. So that has, through my life, been my way of connecting to nature, and it has given me immense pleasure. We are asking you to tell your stories about how you connect to nature, your favorite places, your photos, and today at World Environment Day, not just sit indoor and share stories, get out there into the nature yourself and with your family. This plant is absolutely fantastic. I mean, you have all different varieties. We have the deserts of Africa, the Sahara, the rainforest, the greenery of Brazil or the Amazon. We have the mountains of the Himalayas. There is any number of variety. All of you had your particular favorite place. Today we are in Toronto, Canada, a green city, a less polluted city, but also placed in the landscapes, the enormous prairie of Canada, which is also so beautiful, and with the Niagara Falls, one of the most fantastic waterfalls on planet Earth. We need to protect this planet. Then we need to engage. Many of us are now city dwellers. We need to connect to nature. World Environment Day is about how we as humans can experience nature, you and me, but obviously it's also about politics, how we can take better care of Mother Earth. We need more protected areas, areas where whales at sea or lions or tigers at land can live and thrive. We need a more intelligent coexistence between humans and nature, between humans and wildlife. This week the new railroad through Kenya from Mombasa to Nairobi was opened, and there is a good number of bypasses where elephants and other wildlife can pass the railroad. Again, that's intelligent coexistence. And we need, in a time where more than 50% of us are living in cities, we need much greener cities, green cities like right here in Toronto, where I'm standing now, but cities with public transport, where you build out forests in cities, and where you have green buildings where there are flowers and trees in the buildings. All this is possible if we just do it. We are living at a time where there is enormous opportunities to go green. Let's just grab them. Let's make the slogan made by President Macron of France this week our own. Let's make the planet great again. Happy World Environment Day.